Ilia Topuria has recently just made the move up to the lightweight division, and he knocked out yet another fan favorite fighter in the likes of Charles Oliveira in the first round. There were many questions that UFC fans had regarding how Ilia Topuria will look at lightweight. Many people doubted whether Ilia Topuria's knockout power would carry up to the lightweight division. Plenty of people believed that he'll be too small and he would struggle with the physicality in the grappling exchanges. But after his performance at UFC 317, I think it's clear. Ilia Topuria, he's not just good at 155, he's the best lightweight in the world. Ilia Topuria now has his sights set on fighting Paddy Pimblett for his first title defense, and it looks like the UFC is going to book this matchup. They did the face-off in the cage, which basically confirms the fight, and this matchup has some beef between these two fighters. Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett got into an altercation years ago, I think before Topuria and Paddy Pimblett were even ranked. But they've never liked each other ever since they got into that altercation. They always still go back and forth on social media, and it looks like this beef will be settled under the bright lights of the lightweight championship on the line. This matchup between Ilia Topuria and Paddy Pimblett has not been officially booked or scheduled, and in my opinion, technically, I believe Arman Tsarukyan should be getting the title shot next, but at the same time, I think Ilia Topuria has earned the right to call the shots on who he wants to be his next opponent. So as long as Ilia Topuria versus Paddy Pimblett happens relatively quickly, like before the end of the year, it shouldn't logjam the lightweight division. And the UFC can book Arman Tsarukyan versus Justin Gaethje in the meantime. So I think Ilia Topuria versus Paddy Pimblett would be a perfect matchup to headline the annual Madison Square Garden card in November, or be a huge title fight to end the year on in December. But anyways, in this video, we're going to be doing a deep dive analyzing each fighter and the stylistic clash that will be happening in this matchup. And by the end of this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my early predictions on who I think will win this fight. So without further ado, let's start analyzing this matchup, starting with Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is undefeated at 17-0. This is a defining aspect of his entire brand as an MMA fighter. Ilia Topuria is 5'7" with a 69-inch reach, and he fights out of the orthodox stance. He has been a champion in 2 weight classes now. He was the featherweight champion after beating Alexander Volkanovski, and he is now the lightweight champion after winning the vacant lightweight title against Charles Oliveira. And he broke history at 317 by being the only undefeated fighter to win 2 belts in UFC history. Ilia Topuria has some amazing wins in the UFC, and as of recently, he's been adding some absolute legends to his resume. He has a knockout win over Alexander Volkanovski, where he claimed the featherweight title. He's the first person to ever defeat Alexander Volkanovski at featherweight. He has a knockout over Max Holloway, the only person to knock out and knock down Max Holloway, who is one of my favorite fighters, and that finish still hurts to see. And in his most recent performance, he knocked out Charles Oliveira out cold to claim the vacant lightweight title. He also has some notable wins over fighters like Josh Emmett, Bryce Mitchell, and Ryan Hall. So diving into his strengths, his most lethal strength in my opinion is his striking. He has devastating precise boxing, and he has true one-shot KO power in both 145 and 155. Like I mentioned before, people were kind of skeptical that his power wouldn't translate to the lightweight division. But like we saw at UFC 317, he knocked out Oliveira cold. Like no one does that to Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira, he's not the most durable fighter, but he's never been put out cold by anyone. Me personally, I thought that Ilia Topuria's power would translate like 1-to-1 at lightweight because he throws with such perfect technique and timing. He already fought at lightweight and he knocked out Jai Herbert on short notice. This time, he put on some size and muscle for lightweight, so I didn't think that power was going to be a problem for Ilia Topuria. But going back to his skills, one thing that makes Topuria's striking so lethal is because he works behind that tight guard and he throws clean combinations. And he's one of the only fighters in the UFC that actively seeks to extend his combinations in the boxing. Instead of just throwing a 1-2, he extends to the 3, 4, and 5. This makes him one of the best pocket boxers in UFC history. Ilia Topuria, he also establishes that jab really early in his fights. And what's impressive is that he consistently establishes that jab early against opponents that are rangier and taller than him. And let's not forget his brutal body work. Most of his knockouts, he sets up with the combinations to the body, then goes up high to the head. And he walks down fighters with smart footwork. He does not waste any steps. He knows how to cut off the cage effectively, and he's a master of distance management. Now, when we look at Topuria's defense, he has really underrated defense in my opinion. He has very sharp head movement, a high fight IQ defensively. He rarely overcommits, and he avoids brawling even against aggressive opponents. When he fought Charles Oliveira, in the finishing sequence, Charles Oliveira, he was trying to like go a little bit wild, get in Ilia Topuria's face, and in that moment, Ilia Topuria, he just found the right shot, caught Charles Oliveira on the chin, hit him with another shot, and finished the fight, knocking Charles Oliveira out cold. And not only is Ilia Topuria a good boxer, he's also an elite grappler. His grappling is arguably up to par with his striking. And like we all should know by now, Ilia Topuria, he's a grappler at heart. So he's been knocking his opponents out recently, but he really made his name in MMA off of grappling. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He has heavy top pressure. He has slick submissions. And he's great at causing scrambles and rarely ends up in bottom position. He's very hard to take down, and if he's on top, he's most likely going to finish the fight. Another strength of Ilia Topuria is going to be that mentality. He's very cool under pressure, he's confident, and lately, he's been like speaking his wins into existence. I remember when it was like at a press conference or an interview, and he was just like, I'm knocking out Charles Oliveira in the first round. And he just spoke it into existence at UFC 317, knocked out Charles Oliveira in the first round. So that type of confidence, backed by his undefeated record, that's like something that we never seen in MMA. And even when a fight might not be going Ilia Topuria's way, it always feels like Ilia is still in control. He stayed composed when Volkanovski was pressuring him in the first round, and he avoided the creative grappling threats of Oliveira by his composure. Now, no fighter is perfect, and Ilia does have a few weaknesses, even though I think that he's demonstrated that he's the most complete fighter and well-rounded fighter in the UFC. But there are some small weaknesses that he does have. He rarely shows them. Like I said, he's a very complete fighter, but occasionally he's susceptible to counter shots when chasing a finish. Sometimes he can like wing a big overhand and overswing, which can lead to small openings for counters. But so far, no one has really punished him for that. I always say that your mistakes are only mistakes in the octagon if your opponent capitalizes on them. So as long as no one can really capitalize on Ilia Topuria making these very small mistakes, he's really not going to pay for them like other fighters. And another weakness that you could probably say that he might have is that he doesn't have that many minutes logged in the lightweight division compared to a lot of other fighters who've built their career at 155. He did knock out Charles Oliveira in the first round, so theoretically, you can say that he's still never proven that he can hang with these lightweights as the fight gets into those championship rounds. Maybe that size disadvantage starts getting to Ilia Topuria in the 4th and 5th rounds, or his cardio might not hold up since he did pack on extra muscle when he moved to lightweight. But I feel like at this point, we might be like kind of nitpicking with the weaknesses because overall, Ilia Topuria, he's one of the most complete fighters in the lightweight division and even in the whole UFC roster. So now that we're done with analyzing Ilia Topuria, it's time that we move on to Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, who is another top contender in the UFC lightweight division and could possibly be Ilia Topuria's next opponent. Paddy Pimblett, he has a record of 23-3. Paddy Pimblett is 5'10 with a 73-inch reach, and he's very big for the lightweight division. Of course, he's coming off of the win against Michael Chandler, the biggest one of his career. He also beat fighters like Bobby Green, and he has wins over Tony Ferguson, Jared Gordon, and Jordan Levitt. When we look at Paddy Pimblett's strengths, he's a very, very strong grappler. He's strong in scrambles. He can capitalize on submissions as they're given to him in moments. He's a very physical fighter in the grappling. he kind of reminds me of a more durable Charles Oliveira. He always takes the back of his opponents when it's given to him, and he loves to attack that rear naked choke. He also has tons of other submissions in his arsenal. He's very good at top pressure with great ground and pound, and if he slices into that mount position, he's most likely going to get a finish. I can't overstate how lethal his grappling is. He's probably like the second best grappler and submission artist in the lightweight division, second to only Charles Oliveira. And now that we looked at his grappling, he also has some good strengths in the striking. He's kind of wild and unorthodox in some moments, but lately he's been adding some more composure in his wins. Like he tightened up his striking against Michael Chandler and Bobby Green, and he has very good kicks from range. He showed that he can fight from range and just drill that teep kick to the body. In his last fight against Michael Chandler, he used that front kick up the middle really well, and it forced Michael Chandler to be uncomfortable being out in range. And that forced Michael Chandler to try and engage Paddy Pimblett, and that's when Paddy Pimblett caught him with that flying knee. Also, going back to the kicks, he has very good leg kicks. When Paddy Pimblett fought Bobby Green, as Bobby Green was closing distance, Paddy Pimblett kicked his leg from underneath him, which caused Bobby Green to switch to a bad takedown attempt, which led to the finish on the ground. Usually, he does use his striking as a bridge to get to the grappling, since he's mainly a grappler stylistically. But another strength that we have to look at when you're mentioning Paddy Pimblett is his durability and his heart in the cage. He's proven hard to finish, he survives bad spots, and he keeps on pushing. He has a really good chin, although when you're facing Ilia Topuria, nobody has a good chin at all. Now, let's move on to Paddy Pimblett's weaknesses. In recent fights, his striking defense and boxing fundamentals still look pretty sketchy. He still gets hit clean by straighter, sharper punches. Another weakness is going to be his wrestling. His wrestling is solid, but it's not at the elite level to control someone like Ilia Topuria. Most of his grappling success comes from his elite jiu-jitsu. We rarely see him shoot that many double legs and single legs for how grappling oriented his style actually is. And another weakness we have to mention is that his distance management does have some holes in it. Although he has improved in his last two fights, in his older fights, he used to just crash in the distance and try and brawl and break you by being in your face. He does it less often now than he did. He's more of a technical fighter now, but it's still something that Topuria can capitalize on if he acts like that in some moments. And another weakness for Paddy Pimblett is going to be his footwork. Sometimes the footwork can be a big issue for Paddy Pimblett. He tends to move straight in and out rather than cutting angles consistently. This makes it easier for him to be countered by very sharp strikers. He also overcommits forward. He often rushes forward with wide punches, relying on chaos rather than calculated foot positioning. This leaves him open to be hit clean, especially by someone who's a good counter striker. Like I said before, Paddy Pimblett, he really moves just forward and backward. Very linear movement when you compare him to strikers who are very skilled in that area. And my last weakness that I think that Paddy Pimblett has, and this could be his biggest weakness, is his lack of elite competition. Paddy Pimblett's last 3 wins are Tony Ferguson, Bobby Green, and Michael Chandler. All of these fighters were pushing 40 and mostly watched when Paddy Pimblett fought them. And looking back at all these wins, they aged pretty bad for Paddy Pimblett. There are still questions if Paddy Pimblett can hang with an elite lightweight who is still in their prime. That's why I think Paddy Pimblett should have fought Arman Tsarukyan. It does feel like he's been getting cherry-picked matchups as he was making his way up the lightweight rankings. Now that we've broke down both fighters, it's time that we get into the actual matchup and how both of these styles are going to clash in the octagon. So when we analyze the striking, obviously Topuria, his striking is going to be levels above Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett, he throws more wider looping punches, and Ilia Topuria throws more straight shots and more well-timed shots. And Paddy Pimblett, he does have way looser defense than Ilia Topuria. That can give Ilia some good openings to land some great counter shots. We can also talk about the body shots of Ilia Topuria. That's going to punish Paddy Pimblett as he tries to enter into range. Now, when we look at the grappling is going to be really even. I might give the edge to Paddy Pimblett in this fight, since he will definitely be the bigger fighter in this matchup. He's going to have the bigger frame, and it might be hard for Ilia to deal with that as the former featherweight. But the thing about it, Ilia Topuria's wrestling defense is better than Paddy Pimblett's wrestling offense. And Topuria, he's also great at causing reversals during scrambles, and if he's almost about to get taken down. That can be a very good thing to pull out if Paddy Pimblett does get the best of him in some exchanges. So Paddy Pimblett's best chance is going to be to like create some type of chaos, force some wild exchanges, and hope to catch Topuria slipping in a scramble. But Ilia Topuria, he's shown against Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Charles Oliveira that he can handle a very high pace against creative opponents and still stay sharp. So, as for a final prediction for this matchup, I think that Ilia Topuria will win by a TKO in round 2. The championship precision, power, and composure I think is going to be too much for Paddy Pimblett's style, even with Paddy Pimblett's recent improvements. The only path for Paddy Pimblett would be like a freak submission in a scramble, or Topuria just making a uncharacteristic mistake. And I don't think that people realize how much Paddy Pimblett resembles Charles Oliveira. And like we've just seen, Charles Oliveira lacks defense in some moments in the striking. And another thing that I want to mention is that Paddy Pimblett, he fights really tall and he sometimes leaves his chin on a silver platter. This is a very lethal mistake to make against someone who is as good as finding your chin as Ilia Topuria. Paddy Pimblett, he doesn't even tuck his chin in some striking exchanges. You can see him like rushing in to striking exchanges with his chin up in the air. And when you're dealing with someone like Ilia Topuria, that's just like basically just handing Ilia Topuria the win. So that's really my main reasoning for picking Ilia Topuria to win this fight. Ilia Topuria, he's the better boxer. He has the KO power. Paddy Pimblett, he doesn't really have that anomaly, that factor that can just end the fight like Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria, you make one mistake and he'll shut your lights off, and you'll be waking up with Ilia Topuria getting his hands raised while you're wondering what's going on. So that's really my main reason for picking Ilia Topuria, but this video is a early prediction video. So if this matchup gets made in the future, I might release like a sequel to this video with more detailed analysis of how each fighter fights and the stylistic breakdown. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. As usual, like, comment, and subscribe. I would love to see you guys' opinions about this matchup in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in my next video.